Today we're focusing on the best SEAdLINNG match of 2023, a Beyond the Sea title match between Arisa Nakajima and Sareee from August 25th at Tokyo Korakuen Hall. Arisa Nakajima hasn't been as amazing since she injured her knee, inexplicably taking a horrendous drop off of Hiroyo Matsumoto's shoulders to the floor on August 17, 2022, resulting in an abrupt end to her third reign with the Beyond the Sea title, as well as 4+ months on the shelf. She's been slowly returning to form, picking things up in the second half of 2023. Though she maintained her famous crispness and precision throughout, this is the first match we've seen from her in ages that exemplifies the majority of what made her the female wrestler of the decade for the 2010s. Arisa's unparalleled ability to maintain intensity for the duration of the match has been one of the main aspects missing from her recent performances. She isn't going full bore in every reasonable singles match like she did in her 20s, keeping the action from diverging from the plot by doing something useful to keep it on track when the opponent begins stalling or meandering. Part of the reason for this is obviously breaking down, but also, her role has changed with seniority, and these days, as the big fish in the small pond, she's usually just bullying some poor kid, who despite having talent and being in the main event for lack of anyone else, isn't portrayed as being remotely credible enough to put Arisa in jeopardy, much less actually defeat her. This results in rather by-the-numbers glorified semi-squashes that, while good because Arisa is still one of the very best, and the students are definitely a lot better than the majority of girls with their limited experience because they are actually receiving solid training, still lack drama and don't add up to the sum of the talent involved. They just wind up being rather interchangeable and disposable 3-star range bouts that you enjoy for sure, but forget by the next day. Part of Arisa's greatness was that she was amazing as both the front-running Chichibu bruiser as well as the imperiled underdog who beats the odds of being one of the smallest women through sheer determination and non-stop all-out violent aggression, but due to the lack of reasonable opponents these days, we haven't seen much of the latter. For Arisa's fourth title defense, SEAdLINNG finally brought in a star who was in her prime that Nakajima would feel comfortable having an even contest with. While this would likely have been a great match had it taken place a few years ago, when Arisa was in better form, and Sareee hadn't wasted 2 prime years rotting away in an Orlando warehouse, the result was nonetheless one of the best women's matches of 2023. It was one of the stiffest matches I've seen in a long time, filled with thudding elbows sure to produce a lot of swelling and bruising. It's a rare long bout that just flew by because there was no downtime. Certainly, just maintaining the intensity for nearly half an hour in an era of endless main events that largely consist of filler is an accomplishment in and of itself, though it was an aspect of Nakajima's work we sometimes took for granted in her heyday. Arisa and Sareee had 2 tag matches leading up to their big singles match that surprisingly saw each eat a pin. On the July 26, 2023 SEAdLINNG show, Nakajima and Itsuki Aoki defeated Sareee and Riko Kawahara when Arisa pinned Sareee with her DXD, then embarrassed her in the post-match. Sareee took revenge on her own produce show, Sareeism Chapter 2, on August 4th, teaming with Kairi to defeat Nakajima and Takumi Iroha when Sareee pinned Arisa with a wrist clutch uranagi. These matches were both good, with the latter being the better of the two because it was taken more seriously as a big main event due to having bigger names and going longer. But there was a huge improvement in quality here without the likes of Kairi to get in the way. They were really trying hard to allow tonight's match to evolve in a logical and believable manner. It purposely wasn't that flashy, as they instead focused on delivering a more credible version of the traditional brutal rival war, with the spots appearing to occur a lot more naturally, and thus believably, rather than just being there for the sake of doing cool things. They generally utilized offense that could be set up and performed quickly and realistically, so the opponent didn't look too silly waiting around for them. The end result is, at least in a non-shoot wrestling sense of a match that still contains some running and jumping, this looked and felt like a fight, rather than the usual juvenile pissing contest where wannabe tough guys just concede to be hitting hard back and forth. Arisa played the bully, and while theoretically the tougher of the two, Sareee was rough enough to stand up to her, and wrestled the smarter match. Part of the build-up saw Sareee vow to break Arisa's arm, which Sareee worked from almost the outset to neutralize as much of Arisa's aggression as possible. Sareee just seemed a step ahead of Arisa strategy-wise. For instance, Arisa rolled through a German suplex attempt and countered with a foot stomp, but then Sareee rolled Arisa, except her foot stomp was to the bad right arm. Arisa began exchanging slaps, but Sareee was hitting her full strength with her right arm, while Arisa was forced into much weaker left-handed blows. Arisa trying to avenge Saree's mount elbows on the floor led to Arisa getting armbarred. Though they built the match up really well, one of the faults was that Sareee largely gave up on the arm work midway, even though it was working, with Arisa just going back to throwing huge right-handed elbows so the impact would be more impressive. The primary exception was a near finish where Sareee countered Arisa's charge into a wakigatame. The violence continued to intensify until they had a big thudding elbow exchange. Arisa finally wound up for a big walking elbow, only to have Sareee decide to not play along with the escalation, and instead cut her off with a floating kick to the bad arm. Sareee began to go to town with elbows, but appropriately got cut off when she charged at Nakajima, leading to the cliched double sell. When they finally got back up, Nakajima threw a series of elbows, putting Sareee down then continuing from the mount. I'm normally not a big fan of striking in pro wrestling because it seems so contrived once you've seen even the lowest of low-level kickboxing matches, but Arisa rarely falls into that category due to her fiery barrages, and once again all the action here was no nonsense without wasted time or motion. They departed from the brutal striking enough to keep things interesting, with a couple excursions to the floor highlighted by an Arisa double foot stomp off the top, a Sareee backdrop on the stage, and an Arisa flying DDT onto the apron, though overall, most of the attempts at more phony offense failed miserably. They appeared to be going the distance, with the bizarre call of 2 minutes left, despite it being a 30-minute time limit match that purportedly went 27:32, but Sareee managed a series of exploders before finally scoring the pin again with a wrist clutch uranagi to become the 10th Beyond the Sea champion. Sareee may still be a little below her 2019 level, but she's definitely back in a big way, more or less matching Arisa here at every turn. She still isn't the better of these two when all things are equal, but has nonetheless put herself into the best female wrestlers of 2023 conversation by working harder on a more consistent basis than almost any of her peers. Her first title defense against Ayame Sasamura from December 28th was, for instance, better than Arisa's defense against Sasamura from March 20th, because Sasamura was actually portrayed as having a chance to beat Sareee, which allowed it to be a competitive and more dramatic main event that brought out a higher level from both, rather than an entertaining foregone conclusion that didn't justify their highest gears. I give this match 4 out of 5 stars.